So this is a general theory video talking about how 3D animated films get made. So the heading is the 3D production pipeline. Really, it's about how a movie gets put together. How does an animated movie get put together? And this scene here is taken from the Charge of the Light Brigade, and this is Victorian children working in a coal mine in England. Sometimes working on an animated film can feel a bit like hauling coal in dark tunnels. Anyway, just as a general introduction, the basic stages in making any film are, as you probably know, development, pre-production, production, and post-production. So let's dig a little deeper into those. As an animation executive once said to me, the trouble with animation is it is always either too early to tell or too late to change. And what he meant by this is that the trouble with animation is it isn't really finished until it's finished. It's not like live action where you can shoot footage and you know what that footage is going to look like. With animation, you don't really see the finished product until it's done, and so it can be quite a frustrating process in that way. Now, back to development, sometimes known as development hell. Why is it called development hell? It's called development hell because it can go on forever. And especially in Hollywood, the big studios tend to have lots of projects in development, and they're dividing resources between them, and they don't necessarily know which film they want to make. And it can go on for a long time. And so the people working on it can have a lot of fun, but you also find that a lot of your efforts go into the bin. There are four basic stages of development: concept, outline, treatment, and script. Concept is obviously just the idea. The outline is when you basically write a 2 or 3 page outline of what the story will be. A treatment would be a much bigger document, maybe 20 or 30 pages, basically telling the whole story beat by beat. And then the script would be the same as the treatment, but with dialogue. So we start with a concept. We start with a what if idea. What if, for example, what if the toys came alive when the child left the bedroom? What if there really were monsters lurking in the child's closet? What if a kitchen rat wanted to be a wonderful chef? You can see I've got 3 examples from Pixar movies here, and that's because Pixar is particularly good at this. They're very good at what's called the high concept ideas. Now, the outline would be a 2 to 3 page outline of the story. Typically, most stories are a 3-act structure, which is a posh way of saying a beginning, a middle, and an end. And typically, within that, there'd be about 40 sequences. That's your sort of typical film outline. The treatment will be a fully fleshed out telling of the story. You've still got your 3 acts, you've still got your 40 sequences, but this is much more detail. Could be 20 or 30 pages. So treatment is properly fleshed out. Now the script. This obviously is a standard format. A live action script might be 100 to 120 pages. Animation tends to be shorter, and that's because animated films tend to be shorter, partly because they're expensive to make, but also because children's attention spans tend to be shorter. Generally speaking, when you're writing scripts, you want to use professional writing software. The reason for this is that it auto-formats your script. And the brutal truth of working in Hollywood, or indeed in London, or anywhere where films are made, is that if you don't format your script correctly, people will assume, rightly or wrongly, that you don't know what you're doing. So the software that everyone uses is called Final Draft. It's fairly expensive, costs about $200, but it does mean that your stories will get auto-formatted in the correct manner. Okay, so that's development. Now, once the script is approved, that's really the beginning of pre-production. And this is where the studio starts to spend money. Development is relatively cheap, certainly compared with actual making of the film. Production is obviously the most expensive bit, but pre-production is also expensive because the studio is starting to spend some cash. It is, however, the most fun part of the process. This is where you start to storyboard your movie. You're happy with your script. Now you go about to your storyboard artists. You might have a head of story and perhaps 8 story artists working under them. Fewer on a lower budget movie. Perhaps 1 artist per sequence per month, something like that. And it might take you 4 months or 6 months to get the whole movie up on reels. 4 months if it's an independent production and you're in a hurry and you've not got much money. Then what happens is the storyboard artist now they pitch the sequences to the director, and this is this is a storyboard artist here with the famous story stick, and he is taking the director here through all of the images that he's drawn. So this is the story pitch. Typically, this is done to the director with the other story crew, so everyone can see how the story is unfolding. Assuming the director likes the pitch, the storyboards will be sent off to editorial. They will scan them, although increasingly now storyboards are done digitally, removing the paper part of the process. But assuming it's still done on paper in the slightly old-fashioned way, then someone will scan all those images and editorial will assemble them all into a first rough draft of that particular sequence. So they will cut in sound, they will cut in the actors' voices, they will cut in music, songs if necessary, whatever's needed. And when all of those sequences are cut together, you have what's called the animatic, sometimes called a storyboard animatic. And basically, that is the timing out of all the storyboards with temporary, often temporary voices. Sometimes you have the real voices, the real actors' voices by then, but more commonly it's temporary voices, often called scratch, and temporary music, typically culled from other movies. You're not going to pay a composer at this stage. So what you do is you get a good editor will start pulling in their favorite music from other movies, music which fits that particular sequence. This process is called putting the movie up on reels, often because you're putting the story reels together. Sometimes the animatic will be called a story reel, an animatic. Sometimes in a very old-fashioned way, it gets called a Leica reel because they used to be shot on Leica cameras, but that's a less common term these days. Sometimes you're also going to do a proof of concept test, which would show the investors what they're going to get. Because, as we've said with animation, it's often either too late to change or too early to tell. So you do a proof of concept, maybe a 30-second piece of animation, which you can show to the investors and say, this is what we're making, this is what you're going to get. Do you like it? And hopefully the answer is yes. At this stage, you're also going to cast voice talent. You're going to try and get big stars to sign up to the movie. You probably don't want to sign them up too long because every day in the booth is going to cost you money, and you might be wanting to use scratch audio for your reels at this stage. Then once you've put your animatic together, you're going to have a screening. And this is the most important part of the process for the director. This is the really crucial bit. You've got an awful lot of people, producers, directors, all kinds of interested parties looking at this storyboard animatic and asking if they like it. And this is a difficult moment because it's very hard to look at a series of still images cut together with music and scratch audio and decide if you like it or not, because very few people are used to looking at storyboards, and it's very hard to look at storyboards for 80 minutes without getting bored. But let's assume that the screening goes well, everybody likes it. Some of the sequences will be better than others, and basically some of them will inevitably go back for revisions. And hopefully the good ones you can start to think about putting into production. Meanwhile, you've got visual development going on, you've got production design going on. Your production designer is going to design the look of the film, they're going to design environments. You'll also have character designers working to design the characters. What does the whole film look like? You'll even have people designing little things like props. And character design is incredibly important because you need a unified look. And this is a still obviously from The Lion King, and the reason I've got that here is because I think The Lion King is an example of a film that had a very, very good unified character style. Someone's going to have to do character turnarounds. This might be your character designer might do this, or it might be someone else in the art department. This is a drawing that I did on an Israeli film called The Wild Bunch. We had to do turnarounds of these corn stalks. This is one of the baddies, a sort of Arnold Schwarzenegger character. Then there are model packets. Again, this is coming from the art department. These are from Toy Story, and these are very, very detailed information for the modeling department on how to build each character. Detailed drawing so that modeling doesn't have any questions. The modeling department knows exactly what they're supposed to model. Here's a model packet for Buzz Lightyear. And once this stuff gets approved, you can see John Lasseter's little stamp down there. That's it. No more changes. Goes into modeling, and that's it. And that's the next stage. Approved character designs get sent to the modeling department. And some of this will be happening in pre-production. But there's a bit of a blur between pre-production and production with this stuff. The next thing that's going to happen is the approved character models are going to get rigged. That means building skeletons, skinning them, and so on. And then, of course, there's rig testing, or what they call at DreamWorks rig wrecking, which is where animators start to test the rigs. Do they work? How do they move? Can you actually get the functionality out of them that you want? So the animators and the rigging department and the modeling department are all going to have to work together here to test it out. The animators will do walk cycles. How do they walk? How do they move? What kind of gestures do they have? What are their sort of special characteristics? What makes these characters interesting? Then there's visual development. What does the movie look like? Again, that's production design, which we've already talked about. But someone's also going to have to do a style guide for the movie, and that the style guide will have to be broken down sequence by sequence so that everybody knows what the individual sequences look like. So you'll do color scripts, and a color script will show how the color palette will change through the film. What's the shot progression? What will the color palette look like for a shot that's a sequence that's at night in the rain versus one that's in the middle of the day? How will it be different? You've got to start building assets. You've got to start building the environments. You'll hear this word come up all the time on a CG movie, the assets, and that means the sets, the props. How many sets do we need? Producers are not going to want you to build too many sets. You may have to make changes to the story. The sets may be too big. They may be too extensive. You may have to make compromises there. These are drawings from Andy's room from Toy Story. You're also going to get your voice talent on board, and once the investors approve the story reels, then you're going to get big name actors to sign on board if they haven't done so already. Typically, that might be 5 days of work in a recording studio. Actors like doing voice recordings because it's relatively easy for them. They don't have to go on location. It doesn't take up months of their life. It's just a few days of work. And you can even do it remotely nowadays. So you can be in a sound booth in New York, and the actor can be in Los Angeles, and you can patch them in via these very, very high quality phone lines, and that can work really, really well. So the actor doesn't even have to come to you. Still, it's going to cost you money. A big actor might be $50,000 plus a percentage of the gross profits of the film. Finally, we get to production. And at this point, I'm going to stop this video and pick it up in the next one.